Hi, this is Angus Campbell, and as promised at last, I'd like to introduce you to my 1971 power set that I alluded to in my channel introduction. And today I'll focus on introducing you to my 1970 BSA Fury, which was built by the factory for the 1971 launch undertaken at the Royal Lancaster Hotel in London. So without further ado, let's have a look at the bike, introduce you to some of the literature that was produced at the time, but also give you a bit of history of the bike and the provenance and how I acquired it. So let's get to it. Okay, so here we have 1970 BSA Fury, built on the 6th of November 1970 for display at the BSA Power Set UK launch at the Royal Lancaster Hotel on the 10th of November 1970. It's absolutely bog standard, it's totally original and unrestored, and was purchased from Vale Onslow Motorcycles in Birmingham, Stratford Road, Birmingham, in 1991. They'd had the bike on display there since it was given to them to publicise the model after the November 1970 launch. There were one or two or several show models actually built for display, and this was the only example at the 1970 launch. Quite whether it went straight to Vale Onslow's from that launch or not, I'm not sure, and Peter Vale Onslow wasn't able to confirm that, but certainly it ended up at Vale Onslow pretty early on its life, as Vale Onslow was the largest BSA dealer in Birmingham, just down the road from the factory. So to have a quick look round then, so the colour is plum crazy with the dove grey frame. A lot of the cycle parts are common with the other power set models. Obviously we've got the conical hubs, the telescopic forks are common, silencers are common, and obviously rear wheel as well, although to note that the chain drive is on the opposite side, so therefore bearing retainers etc. Are left-hand thread, not right-hand thread. I think it is. It's the other way around anyway from the standard model. The paintwork has held up pretty well on this because it's been inside most of its life, and the reason being that the motor, although it looks complete, is empty. It was just built up as a shell. So the gear lever, the kickstart are both fixed. Also, you'll note there's certain blanking plugs that have been put in temporarily, such as the plastic one there, which actually goes into the dipstick and stroke filler cap for the gearbox. One or two bolts are, this one for instance is just loose. There's another blanking plug there to actually mask the drilling for what would have been the gear change quadrant spindle, which hangs from that position. But other than minor things such as that, the motor looks relatively complete, and indeed is complete. But there are no engine internals, no gearbox internals, and there are giveaways are things like there's no electrical connection to what would have been contact breakers under this cover here. You can see the mounting for what would be the drive for the optional extra electric start. This one was never fitted with one of the standard Lucas starter motors. How do we think this is the show model? Well, there are several things on this bike that marry up with official photographs at the time. The first is that with respect to the standard Powerset twin leading shoe conical front hub, this is a very early version where instead of a spring between the two operating arms, there's just a rubber that covers the cable, and that was a very early revision. Also on this one as well, you'll notice that the cams, the levers, operating levers are pointing inwards. That seem to indicate that the brake verniers are not adjusted properly. Well, they actually are, and although I've adjusted the brake verniers, I've never taken the brake apart. There's something not quite right there, but again, that's a sort of giveaway of this bike in photos from the period. The other thing is that with respect to some of the cables, originally with the Powerset, some of the cables were grey coloured to try and match the frame, but on this one the tacho cable is actually painted. It's this one here, and again that shows up on some photographs of the time. Also things like cable ties in this position here, that matches up with the photograph of this bike with the model at the time for the official factory photograph. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. Karen. Oh dear, it'll come back to me shortly, so apologies, but I'll put a copy of the photo up anyway, and other period photographs anyway, just to show you what the bike looked like at the time when it was being publicised. Apart from that, the other thing to note is that under the seat all the electrical components have been installed, and in fact at one point we put a battery in it. The battery lives underneath the tool tray here. We put a battery in it, connected it up, and most of the electrics work. Lights, indicators, etc. actually all work on the machine. Now, the original intention was, in purchasing this from Vale Onslow, was to do what one or two other people have done, and that is to attempt to find scarce parts to try and build up a running motor. But in the end, that never happened, because I was lucky enough to come across via a tip-off from a friend of a stash of Fury parts that had been collected by another man, and I was lucky enough to be in a position to be able to purchase those. And what we decided to do then was to build up a separate bike using those parts or patterns from this bike to complete the rolling chassis, etc., and to make up a separate second running fully functional Fury SS. And the SS, the Sport Special, or Street Scrambler, sorry, is the one with the high level black exhaust rather than the low level chrome exhaust as on this. And if we look quickly into the garage, there it is coming along on the bench. The motor's away at the moment, having some machining done to certain parts by a more competent engineer than myself. I'm just a mechanic and a fitter really. I'm not an engineer at all, just self-taught. And some of the engine parts, namely castings that we received with stashes of spares from various places, were blanks, so we needed to get them machined up. But the Fury SS is well on the way there. We've got the high level pipes, and we need to make up the high level black silencers. But I'll probably do another feature on that at some point. Just then to bear in mind that with respect to the show Fury itself, it has been a mound of information pertaining to original parts and being able to temporarily disassemble parts from this bike to use as patterns to make up additional components and that's actually been a godsend, because there are certain parts you do come across fairly regularly for this bike that got out of the factory, such as rear brake, pedal, horns, even speedometer drives, which work the other way around because they're on the other side, etc. I've seen the odd rare mudguard as well. So bits and pieces do pop up from now and again, but certain components, such as the right hand footrest components and all the items associated with mounting up the rear brake pedal itself, the mounting plates, the adjusters, etc., they're all very, very scarce. I've never come across those, and I've had to make those up as patterns from this. Also things like the top cover off the air cleaner box, which sits under here, just in front of the battery, behind the squeezed in carbs. Again, we've had to make up parts for the air cleaner, the air filter mounting. It's not the top cover either. It's the base plate that sits on the plenum chamber, upon which the air filter sits. We've had to get that made up. So there we are, just a quick introduction to my first BSA Fury, if you like. So I've had it since 1991. So let's have a quick look at documentation that is available occasionally for this bike. Okay, so here we are up on the bench in the garage, looking at documents and literature, etc., associated with the model at the time, because in preparation for the launch, a lot of things were actually written and published. Obviously, within the power set brochure, then we've got a double page on Furies, the Fury Roadster, E35R for Roadster, and on the right the E35 SS, E35 being the model number for the 350 double overhead cam range. And there's plenty of those about. But also there was, in preparation for the 1972 model year, because although the Fury wasn't released for the 71 model year, they continued to develop it, and were intending to release it in 72 before they then scrapped it altogether in October-November 71. They did publish what appears to be a proof parts book. It's got the normal glossy material cover, in common with other parts book of the time, and in the sort of unique striping shades of pink, orange and yellow that they used, each one specific to each parts book. But inside, with respect to this one, the internal pages, although they're very well printed and not copied, the material, the paper, is like a proofing paper, and I think these are probably a proof run of the print. But they do come up occasionally. There's lots of copies about, which are usually very, very poor quality photocopies. But this one, when I first came across this, I was a bit disappointed at first, because I thought I'd been ripped off with yet another photocopy. But I've been told by other reliable sources that the only original articles available do have this strange pale blue paper. But at least, as I say, within these, the prints are very, very good, and you can see all the numbers and corresponding lines to the components, which in a lot of the photocopies you just can't make out at all with some of them, because they're so poor. So that's the parts book. Now, it was thought that the owner's handbook was never published. I do know where there's a master copy of it, but indeed, all of a sudden I came across one, believe it or not, one on eBay a few years ago, and then I came across another one on a stall at Stafford, and these are, fully published items, standard owner's handbook at the time for the 71 power set, but specific to the 350cc double overhead cam model. So that was a very welcome find. I couldn't believe it when it popped up. And then the other one, there's another book from the period as well. It's a motorcycle data pump book, which is marked private and confidential for, I presume at the time, for potential dealers only. And the E35SS and E35R are listed in there with all the other models from the range, providing all the specs and data for each of these models, electrical equipment, etc. So a very handy little book. I haven't seen another one of these, but I'm sure there are more about, because so this is a proper published book as well. So there we are. That's a quick summary of the BSA Fury, the show model. Stood outside in the relative bright light, following a bit of a clean today. And what I'll do in future videos to follow up the original channel introduction is I'll do a separate video on the A75V here. I'll do a bit more on the trials and tribulations of building up the E35SS. And then behind me, something we've just begun, is an A70L 750 Lightning, for which only 200 were built for homologation purposes, for flat track racing of the 750s in the middle of 1971. We're at the stage now where a lot of the components are done, and except for the engine, and we're going to start building up the rolling chassis, because all the components are there and painted. And once the rolling chassis is built up, then we'll attack the motor, which has got quite a bit of work to be done on it, because it looks as though at some point it's somebody's either removed the left-hand rod or it's let go. But luckily it hasn't pushed the con rod through the cases. So here it's the matching numbers A70, which is pretty rare in itself, this one being GE01035 A70L. So plenty of things to video and focus in on in the future, and these 4 bikes are basically my power set collection, and what I'll be focusing this channel on in the future. So hope you've enjoyed that intro to the Fury. As I say, more to come on the other bikes in the near future, and hopefully I'll bump into any interested parties at any of the shows that I attend where I display these. So certainly the Rocket 3 and the Fury have been displayed at Stafford a couple of times in the last 3 or 4 years. Also, I've been involved in building up, on behalf of a friend, a Triumph Bandit T35 SS in Jealous Green, and that's also been displayed. And I'll try and put together a bit of a story around how that was built up, and the fact that we sort of pulled parts between the my Fury SS, the E35 out there, and the T35 SS to get the T35 SS Bandit up and running. A separate video of which you'll see on my channel from a few years ago, just after we completed the build of it. So that's how it all ties together. Hope that's been interesting, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much for watching. Cheers.